He bought a dating app subscription the day before I found out I was pregnant. The receipt was just sitting there, tucked quietly inside a folder of old bank statements I never should have been scrolling through at 2 in the morning. Our son was asleep in the next room. The monitor on the nightstand glowed soft green, his tiny chest rising and falling in that perfect, untroubled rhythm that only babies have. And I was sitting cross-legged on our bed in the dark, with my phone in my hands, and my entire body had gone completely, unnervingly still. August 2024. A 1-month subscription. A dating app. Charged to a card I recognized, with a timestamp I will never, ever forget. The day before I found out I was pregnant. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't even move. I just stared at that number on the screen, this small, almost laughable transaction, and felt something shift inside me that I don't think has fully shifted back. Like a tectonic plate. Like the ground itself deciding, quietly and without permission, to rearrange. This is the story of learning who someone was before they became who they are now, and trying to figure out if that even matters. Let me take you back to where this started. I was 20 years old when we met. He was 23, older in that way that feels significant when you're young, but that you later understand means almost nothing at all. He was funny. He had this easy, unhurried way of moving through the world that made me feel calm just being around him. Like nothing was ever really that serious. Like everything was gonna be fine. We moved fast. We always did. That was our thing. Leaning into the momentum, trusting the current. Within months we were inseparable. Within a year we were talking about the future in that casual, matter-of-fact way that means you've already decided. I want to be honest with you, things were not always perfect. No relationship ever is, and ours had its friction, its silences, its moments where I'd lie awake wondering if I was reading things right. But I loved him. I loved the way he laughed at his own jokes half a second before the punchline. I loved that he remembered small things. I loved that when I was anxious, he could talk me down with an almost supernatural patience. What I didn't know, what I was about to spend months slowly, painfully learning, was that the person I thought I knew had an entire interior life I'd never been shown. Our son was born in May 2025, and I want to say something about that because it matters. Having a baby changes everything. But not always in the ways you expect. You expect the sleep deprivation. You expect the blur of feedings and diapers and that terrifying first night home from the hospital when you're suddenly responsible for this tiny, miraculous, and possibly fragile person. What you don't expect, what nobody warns you about, is how brutally honest having a baby makes you. About everything. It's like the fog lifts. Or maybe it's more like a new kind of clarity sets in. One born out of pure exhaustion and necessity. Because when you are that tired, that raw, that stripped down to your core, you stop having the energy to not notice things. And I started noticing things. The first one was small. I was on his laptop looking for a streaming password, and I saw a search history that made my stomach drop just slightly. Not crash, just drop, the way it does when something registers before your brain has caught up. He'd been looking up his ex. Not once, not twice, repeatedly, over the course of what looked like months. I confronted him. He was apologetic. He said it was just curiosity, just old feelings he was processing, that it meant nothing and hadn't gone anywhere. He looked me in the eyes and said it was over, done. He deleted the history. I believed him. But then the next thing came. OnlyFans. I found charges on an account I'd access to. Not hidden, not buried. Just sitting there in plain sight the way things are when someone has been doing them so long they've stopped feeling the need to hide. I felt sick. Not because of the platform, but because we had talked about this. We had sat across from each other early in our relationship and had a real conversation about boundaries, and he had agreed. He'd agreed, and then he'd done it anyway, and he'd never told me. I started going through his phone after that. I know how that sounds. I know the arguments against it, the violation of privacy, the corrosive effect of surveillance on trust, all of it. But I need you to understand where I was at. I had a newborn. I was running on fumes. And I had just discovered that the person I was rebuilding my entire life around had been quietly operating by a different set of rules than the ones we'd agreed on together. I needed to know what was real. At some point in those early months after the baby was born, we had a breaking point. I had confronted him about too many things in too short a time, and something in him cracked open in a way I hadn't seen before. He wasn't defensive. He wasn't dismissive. He sat down and he looked at me with this expression I'd never quite seen on his face, something between shame and terror, and he said, quietly, "I thought you were going to leave me and take him." And I realized something in that moment. He wasn't saying it as a manipulation. He was saying it because it was true. Because somewhere in the chaos of new parenthood and confrontation after confrontation, he had finally reckoned with the possibility of losing us, and it had changed him. I watched it change him. The porn stopped. The looking up the ex stopped. The OnlyFans stopped. Not because I was watching, though I was, but because something in him had genuinely, visibly shifted. He started showing up differently. More present. More honest. More like the person I had originally fallen in love with, but more solid somehow. More real. And I want to be fair about this. I want to be fair to myself and to him both, because this story is complicated in ways that I think are worth sitting with. He wasn't a monster. He was a 23-year-old man who had behaved badly, repeatedly, in ways he had never been fully accountable for until the stakes became undeniable. That doesn't excuse it, but it's the truth. Which brings me back to the 2 a.m. moment. The glowing monitor. The folder of bank statements. A month ago, I found it, August 2024. 1-month subscription. A dating app. Charged the day before I walked into the bathroom, hands shaking, and looked at that little pink line that changed the entire direction of my life. I sat with it for 3 days before I said anything. I carried it around like a stone in my chest. This cold, heavy thing that I couldn't put down and couldn't stop touching. I turned it over and over in my mind, trying to find an explanation that made sense. Trying to find a way to understand how someone could do this. We'd been together over a year at that point. We were serious. We had talked about the future. I thought we were on the same page. And the whole time he had been on a dating app. When I finally confronted him, I had rehearsed what I was going to say. I had planned to be calm and direct and measured, and then I sat down across from him and just said it, just put the receipt on the table between us, metaphorically speaking, and waited. His face went through several things at once. Confusion, recognition, something that looked genuinely like shame. And then he said the thing that I've been sitting with ever since. I don't even remember doing that. I don't even remember doing that. I've turned that sentence inside out 100 times. Is it possible? Is it true? Could a person genuinely forget subscribing to a dating app, paying money for it, actively choosing it, while in a committed relationship? Part of me wants to dismiss it as a convenient lie. The kind of thing you say when you're caught and you don't have a better answer. And maybe it is. Maybe it's exactly that. But another part of me, the part that has watched him over the past several months, the part that has seen him genuinely, consistently show up differently, wonders if there's something else going on. Not an excuse, not a justification, but a truth about who he was then versus who he's trying to be now. Because here's what I keep coming back to. The subscription was for 1 month. There's no evidence of communication. No messages I've ever found, no dates, no conversations. He paid for access to a platform and then, apparently, did nothing with it, or nothing that left a trace, which somehow makes it both better and worse at the same time. Better because it means it may not have gone further. Worse because I'm left trying to understand what it means to be that close to the edge. To purchase the ticket without boarding the plane. While being with someone who loves you. While building a life with someone who trusts you. What does it mean that he went that far? And what does it mean that he stopped? Here's the part I've struggled most to articulate, and I want to try to say it clearly. I've been calling this cheating. And when I say that out loud, I get pushback. From people online, from friends, from that internal voice that's always quick to categorize and compare. He didn't physically do anything. He didn't emotionally attach to anyone. He just looked. But here's the thing. Cheating isn't only a physical act. Cheating is a choice. It's the moment you decide, consciously, with your own two hands, to look outside the relationship you've committed to entertain the possibility of someone else, to pay money, literal money, for the option. That's a choice. And choices have weight. I'm not trying to punish him for it. I genuinely don't know how I would even do that now, a year and a half later, when the man in front of me is so different from the one who made it. But I'm also not willing to minimize it. I'm not willing to let it dissolve into the past just because time has passed and things have changed. Because here's what I've realized. The grief of this kind of betrayal doesn't follow a timeline. You don't get to process it in real time when you find out about it after the fact. You find out now, and suddenly you're grieving something that happened then, and you have to figure out how to hold that grief in the context of a present that looks completely different. It's like mourning someone who's still standing right in front of you. So how do you rebuild trust with someone who broke it before you even knew it was broken? That's the question I keep returning to. That's the one that doesn't have a clean answer. Because the thing about trust is that it's not rational. It doesn't respond to evidence the way you wish it would. I can go through his phone every day, and I have, and I do, and find nothing. Absolutely nothing. And it helps in the moment. And then the moment passes and the doubt creeps back in, quiet and persistent, whispering its familiar questions. What else don't you know? What else are you not seeing? I've started trying to separate two different things in my mind. There's the trust I have in him now, based on who he is today, based on what I observe, based on the way he moves through our life together. And then there's the trust I have in my own ability to know, to see clearly, to not be fooled, to not wake up in another year and find another receipt, because that second kind of trust is the one that was really shaken, not just in him. In myself, when you discover that someone you loved has been operating in the shadows even in relatively small ways, it doesn't just make you question them, it makes you question your own perception, your own instincts, everything you thought you knew about what was happening. And rebuilding that, the trust in your own eyes, is a slower, lonelier kind of work. I want to end with something honest because I think you've earned that if you've stayed with me this long. I don't have a resolution. I don't have a tidy ending where I figured it all out and made peace with it and moved forward with clarity and confidence. What I have is a baby who looks exactly like his father and laughs in a way that makes my whole chest ache. I have a partner who is trying, visibly, consistently, in ways that I don't think can be faked indefinitely. And I have this quiet, ongoing work of deciding, every single day, whether what's in front of me is enough to outweigh what I found behind me. Some days it is, some days it is. What I know is this: love is not just a feeling. It's a series of decisions made in the dark, with incomplete information about another person you will never fully know. And maybe that's not a flaw in the design. Maybe that's just what love is. The risk you take when you decide another person is worth the uncertainty. I haven't decided to stop taking that risk. Not yet. But I'm watching. I'm always watching now. And maybe that's the most honest thing I can say about where I am. Before you go, I want to leave you with 3 questions. Not rhetorical ones, real ones worth sitting with. 1. If someone's behavior changes completely after a betrayal is discovered, does the past version of who they were still define them? And how long do we get to hold someone accountable for who they used to be? 2. Is there a meaningful difference between almost cheating and actually cheating? Or is the intent what matters regardless of how far it went? 3. When trust has been broken, is the goal to restore what existed before, or is it to build something entirely new? And which one is actually more honest? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one.